Welcome everybody to the Real Dealz podcast, one of the top-ranked real estate investing podcasts for the last 7 years. This is the place to be for investing strategies you can actually use, expert interviews, and of course, some good old-fashioned entertainment. Now, here's your host for the show, Elliot, the REI guy, Smith.
Podcast listeners, coming at you this week with show 364, and we have Jay Scott from the Bigger Pockets business show this week. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard his story, listened to him talk a lot. He's been active on Bigger Pockets. He was instrumental in me getting started in this business. When I first got on Bigger Pockets, he had done like 10,000 posts already, wrote some books, and I bought his book. So it was really cool. For me personally, I'm interviewing Brandon Turner next week. I just did Jay Scott, these guys that I was like buying their books and like never thought that I would meet them or anything. And now I'm buddies with them and I'm interviewing them on our shows and we were on their shows and it's pretty cool. It's a testament to say, like, when you're out there networking and you're meeting new people and you're going to these events and you're putting yourself out there, the type of relationships that you can have and gain with really cool people. We also went and hung out with Jay and his wife when we were in Florida a couple weeks ago. Spent time with the family, went out to dinner, hung out with the kids. Monty loved hanging out with his kids. I got to see a different side of Jay outside of the real estate world and, events and podcasts and things like that. And I talk about it in the show, but I really admired how good of a father he was and a husband and his concern and just the quality human being. Like, he always comes off when he's posting things or, talking out there, like, you're like, this guy's quality, but you never really know. And I seen him behind the scenes, like, there's no guy better. It seemed like the quality of person that he was very inspiring and made me want to be a better husband, a better father, and how polite his sons were and how well-rounded and how well they talked to us. It was just really cool to see. And his wife, Carol, is awesome and as perky and nice as she is on the show. So, so this one goes deep, but the cool thing about this show is we do talk about some real estate stuff, but we actually get into stuff that Jay hasn't really talked about on a lot of shows. We get into his early life, kind of where he grew up. We talk about his poker days. He was actually took second on a huge World Series of Poker tournament. We talk about his poker playing days where he'd go play the World Series every year. We talk about his career, getting into the real estate, doing the blogs, writing the books. And then we have a really good discussion about economics. I think if you follow Jay Scott, one of the things is he's always putting out really good things on economics, and he goes and learns these things and then shares these well thought out posts. And so really cool, because I love that kind of stuff. If you're not paying attention to where the economy is, where your local economy is, where the market's heading, you're just running blind. And so, at the end of the day, it's an educated guess, but you have to be thinking that way of what's inflation going to do? What's the Fed going to do? What's this stimulus bill going to impact? How's that going to impact? What's the market going to do? So you can kind of plan long-term in the future. So anyway, that's kind of about the show. Pretty excited about that. What's going on with me? We had our inspection with the bank and our appraisal this week on our 24 unit. That went well, except the Freddie guy showed up late, kind of was annoying, but my wife went and did that because I had some other things going. Sounds like that went really well. Hopefully we get all that back and we have no issues and we're smooth sailing from here on out to close on that 24 unit. Also, last week we closed on that teardown house that we're building a 13 unit on in Tri-Cities. That'll be my first new development deal that I've actually closed on. So pretty excited about that. I know nothing about building this stuff. Luckily, I have a good partner that's good at it. And so I'll be posting stuff like that on the Instagram so you can follow along and see how we do that. Also, the dollar bill mailers, we sent those out this week for some more development stuff. We didn't send a ton. We have 1,200 total. I sent out 250 of them, and my response rate's been really good so far. Haven't had anything crazy to write home about, but the response rate has been good, a lot better than direct mail has been in the past. And so I think that speaks to the more expensive piece. And also Cold calling leads seem to be picking up with everybody. It's texting leads picking up. So got a whole lot of good stuff going. The problem is I have too much going. I don't know if you can relate to this, but I have too many fans or irons in the fire, as they say. So really trying to focus on like, what am I good at? So like on the land development, I'm just focusing on acquisitions. My partner is going to focus on like the pre-plat, the development, and the building side of it. So I'm just trying to buy them, help raise the money and things like that. So really just trying to focus on what we're good at, which is acquisitions. We're hiring, if you're in the Tri-Cities area, we're hiring an executive assistant. We just put that job out. We got like 50 applicants in like 36 hours. So people are looking for jobs and looking to hire, looking to be an executive assistant, I guess. One note, if you're filling out a job, if it says like, sends you like, hey, do these assessments or do these things, actually do them, because it automatically says that you really don't care if you don't do this. It's amazing. Like 50 applicants, like only 10 people did the assessments. And so it's like, okay, you just wasted your time and our time. So, if you have job history, that's, short job history, like maybe put an explanation of why you jump jobs so much, but that's just the world of hiring. So we're going to hire that. And other than that, we're just recovering from COVID and feeling good. It's felt really tired. I never got that sick. Chrissy got it, never felt that sick, just really tired. It's definitely a weird disease. So, but kind of been locked up, cooped up, and today's a day we can go out and be okay. And so we're gonna go for a walk. It's our anniversary. So recording this and have 8 years married together, and pretty excited. It's a good feat. That's a good feat for anybody, I think, and testament to my wife and her patience. So I'm gonna wrap up this. And so here's a message from our show sponsor, and we'll catch you soon. Thanks, guys.
All right, Real Dealz podcast listeners, I want to talk quickly about our show's sponsor, Ironbridge Lending. If you guys have not reached out to Ironbridge already to talk to them about funding some of your upcoming flip projects, I highly encourage you to do so. I've known the owner of Ironbridge for a very long time. I've personally borrowed millions of dollars from them over the years to do a number of different projects, and I can say without a doubt, they are the best hard money lending company I have ever come across, and that is the reason why they are the sole sponsor of this show. I've had a lot of other companies reach out to me and want to sponsor this show, but I just won't do it. I feel like I need to be genuine in who we have sponsoring the show, and it needs to be somebody that I've personally done a ton of business with. So I personally vouch for their ability to be the best, hands down, in the world of hard money lending. You won't find better programs, you won't find better terms, and they're lending or will be lending in over 20 states. So chances are, if you're hearing this in whatever state you're in, it's definitely worth it to check out their website, reach out to them, see if they're lending in your state, and if they are, I would absolutely encourage you to do business with them. Another very cool thing to note is that they have a program for most rehabs where you can actually borrow up to 90% of the purchase price. Now, this is given the fact that you are actually buying a deal, which if you're listening to the show, that means you probably are. But if you have an actual deal on the table, they'll fund up to 90% of your purchase price, and they'll even give you rehab funds on top of that, which means that it only takes 10% down to get into a project, which is unbelievable in the hard money world. So do yourself a favor, reach out to Ironbridge Lending, have a conversation with them, see if they're a good fit for you and for your next project. I can guarantee you that you'll be happy that you did.
What's going on, Real Dealz podcast listeners? Pretty excited today. I say that every week, but I got my good buddy, Jay Scott. And the great thing about Jay Scott is when we first started getting in real estate and I got on Bigger Pockets, all I did was read Bigger Pockets posts, and I see this guy, Jay Scott, and then he had these books out, and I bought these books. I didn't read them the whole way, but the concepts were really good. And now he's on my show, our show, getting ready to give me an interview, and became a really good friend. So Jay, thanks for showing up, and really excited to have you.
No problem. And Elliot, had I known you were going to pick up the books, I would have put a bunch more pictures in there for you.
that probably would have been. There used to be like a kindergarten level book and an adult level book.
I don't like to read, but I still want the information.
That's actually perfect. So, well, while we'll segue into that now, but you started investing or started getting involved with BP pretty early, right?
Yeah, actually, I started with BP before I ever invested. For me, BP was the way I learned. So I jumped on in 2008, back before we did our first deal, my wife and myself. And I'm just like, I was trying to figure out like how to, at the time, we weren't even looking at flipping houses. We were looking to buy apartments, like just do the syndication type thing. And I had no idea what that meant, but it seemed kind of cool. And so I went online. I did a search for real estate investing, bigger pocket, hopped on the site, started participating in the forum. People ultimately ended up flipping houses instead of doing multifamily. But bigger pockets for me was basically, that was how I learned.
Now, did you know Josh prior?
No. Okay. I met Josh, the founder, probably a year or two in. I started participating in the forums. I started answering a lot of stuff as I was learning. I kept kind of like deal diaries in bigger pockets. So I was one of the first people to like say, okay, I just bought a house. And then every day I would kind of post like what was going on. And Josh took notice. And because I was kind of contributing more than a lot of people, he reached out to me at some point. And I don't remember how we originally met, but by 2010, 11, we became pretty good friends, and we've been friends for the last decade.
Nice. So let's go back a little bit, because I think our stories are very similar. I think you talk to a lot of people and how they get involved in real estate. They type in real estate investing, bigger pockets comes up, and then they go on there and they start, this is amazing. But so what did you like, let's talk about Jay early life and kind of how you've evolved and you know, who you've turned into now.
So yeah, my family, typical family. I grew up, didn't have a ton of money. I'm not sure if I realized it at the time, but yeah, we struggled with money, and I had two parents that worked really hard to kind of provide for us, and then I had a stepfather later who had his own business, so I kind of saw the entrepreneurial thing, and he had ups and downs. Sometimes it was going well, sometimes it wasn't. But luckily, I think that gave me kind of this exposure to entrepreneurship and business ownership early on, even though a lot of what I saw was not the right way to run a business. Still that attitude of, hey, there's an alternative to, my dad was a salesman. My mom was basically an administrative assistant. And it kind of gave me that knowledge that, hey, there's an alternative to just working for somebody else. And I did work for somebody else. I went the college route and corporate route and did the corporate thing for about 20 years before I went out on my own. But one day I said, hey, maybe there's another way to do things. And that's how I found real estate investing. What
kind of business do you run?
So recently, you mean? Or
your stepdad.
My stepfather. He actually ran the coolest business of all. Back in the this was in the 80s, and he owned an arcade.
Say that again?
Pool hall and arcade.
That's awesome.
This is back in the 80s when arcades were like
they're cool.
Yeah, the greatest thing in the world. Like literally, I would spend my summers playing Pac-Man and Galaga and Donkey Kong. Like as a 8-year-old, 9-year-old, that was like I had friends because of it.
That's awesome. Now, and you grew up in Baltimore?
Yeah, I grew up in Baltimore.
Gotcha. Have you gone back? Do you go back to Baltimore very often, or?
So my family still lives there. I grew up there, lived in the city until I was like 7, 8, 9, then moved to Baltimore County, lived there through high school, lived in Maryland for college. Then after college, a few years after college, I kind of started traveling, went to the West Coast, and my wife and I actually moved back to Maryland, not too far from Baltimore. Back in 2013, we were there for 5 years, and now we're down in Florida. So I've kind of been in and out of Maryland and Baltimore my whole life.
Gotcha. All right. So what did you get your degree in? You went to college, you went to University of Maryland, right?
I did. I went to University of Maryland. I got an electrical engineering degree. Not sure why. I always liked math and science, and I started as a physics major and realized I wasn't smart enough to actually be a physics major. I got my philosophy degree.
How smart do you have to be a physics major? Because I feel like you're pretty smart.
You have to be smarter than me.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so there's levels of smart.
Yeah.
And people think I'm smart, but I'm not smart.
That's
really smart people out there. Let's see, I got a philosophy degree. Unfortunately, none of the big philosophy companies were hiring. So I decided to get an engineering degree as well. again, don't know why. I think somebody said, besides physics, engineering is the hardest major out there. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. And ended up going the computer route, ended up doing some software, some programming and some hardware. And then ultimately got my MBA. So I kind of transitioned over to the business side. And so I've done a little bit of, I've done stuff on the engineering side and the business side and a little bit of everything in the corporate world.
So can you code then? Were you a coder then, or?
I was a really bad coder.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I could, and I did for a long time. But if I have to be completely honest with myself, I was not good at it. And I think that's what kind of led me to go more the business route, because I really enjoyed the technical and the technology, but sitting in front of a computer, like not interacting with anybody and not really like having higher level control of what was going on in the business really annoyed me. I'm the kind of person that I like to run things. And when you're the guy writing software, you're the farthest thing from the guy running things. You're pushing a broom, basically.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right. Well, so you had another career outside of engineering before you got into real estate. Why don't we talk about that? And I think it's the Steinhorn days.
Oh, jeez. Is this the poker career?
This is the poker career.
Yeah. So I started playing poker. I put myself through college. And a lot of the way I paid through college was playing poker in some backroom card rooms in my college town. And this is back in the early 90s before poker was popular. And this was old men, smoky back rooms. I was like the one guy under 50 years old. And yeah, I started playing, and I remember going out to Vegas one year back in the early 90s to watch to see the World Series of Poker. And never even thought about playing. This was again, these were the guys that had been playing for 50 years, Doyle Brunson and guys like that. And some of the names people might have heard of, like Phil Hellmuth when he was young, but all these guys that are like legends. And so people didn't play the World Series of Poker unless you were a poker legend. And so, but I remember doing that in the early 90s and thinking, this is really cool. And so I started playing more seriously, moved to California for a job around 2000, and poker rooms in California are huge. They had and still have some of the biggest poker rooms in the country. And so literally I would go to my job during the day. I'd work 8, 9, 10 hours. Then I would go home. I would change my clothes, run to the card room, and I'd play cards for another 6, 8, 10 hours, sleep for 4 hours, and do the same thing the next day. And I was making as much money playing poker as I was in my day job. And so that went on for a number of years. 2005, I met a few really good buddies that I'm still friends with today that we used to play poker all the time together. 2005, I said, I'm going to give this tournament thing a try. What's his name? Chris Moneymaker.
Moneymaker. I think, what was he? Won 2002, 2001?
2003 or 4, 2003 maybe.
Yeah.
And so right around then, everybody started playing tournaments, and it was great because I'd been playing poker cash games for 20 years. All these people just found poker because of Chris Moneymaker.
Yeah.
I kept playing cash games because all these new players were coming, donating their money. And then 2005, we went out for the World Series of Poker, and my friend said, "Hey, let's play an event or two." And the first event I played was 3,000 people. I mean, events started big back then.
If you don't know poker, that's a lot of people. So
that's a lot of people.
Poker, there's a lot of skill, but there's also some run good factor. You have to get lucky, kind of in real estate. I mean, you got to put yourself in the right situations. But beating out 3,000, if you're going all in on coin flips all the time, it's hard to win every coin flip. So I mean, that's a lot of people.
Exactly. And so I played my first event June of 2005, and I probably have to go back and find it, but there's actually a clip on ESPN of me knocking Phil Hellmuth out of the World Series in event number 3 back in 2005. And I actually went pretty deep in that event. There were 3,000 people. I think I went out 27th or 28th, which was huge. Yeah. I was just, holy crap, my first World Series event, 3,000 some people, and I made it to the top 1%, made a decent amount of money. Finished around 1:00 in the afternoon, and my friend said, "Hey, there's another event starting right now. If you want to go play." I'm like, "Well, I've just been playing for 3 days. I'm tired." Come on, let's play another event. So jumped into the event like an hour later. That one I played for the next 3 or 4 days, ended up taking second. I missed getting a World Series bracelet by a coin flip. So
was that PLO or was that
that was actually a limit event.
Okay.
Largest limit poker event in history at the time. I think there's been one larger since, but they're like 8,000 players. And a guy named
8,000 players, and you got second.
8,000 players. I got second. Guy that beat me, it was the longest final table in World Series history. Guy that beat me was a guy named Eric Froelich. So anybody that followed poker probably knows who he is. He's won 3 or 4 bracelets at this point. But he at that time was the youngest World Series bracelet winner in history.
Okay. So now what was the final hand?
At that point, it didn't even matter. It was a limit event. So basically, it's hard to lose a big portion of your stack on any hand. Final hand, I think it was a King 10. Actually, it is a King 10 because my nickname for a while after that, I misplayed a King 10, and KT was my nickname for a while after that.
That's funny. Now, did you just get blinded out? Did he outplay you, or did you go card dead, or what do you think?
So we got heads up at like 9 o'clock at night. And at the time we were heads up, he had a 2-1 chip lead.
Gotcha.
And we made a deal for the money at that point. Basically, we said, this is how we're going to split the money. So what a lot of people don't know is like first place gets X amount, second place gets Y amount. But at any point, the two people can come together and say, hey, let's make a deal. You're going to take this much, I'll take that much. And so we negotiated a deal. So at 9 o'clock that night, we had negotiated what the money split was going to be. So it didn't matter who won, except that the winner got the bracelet.
Yeah.
So I knew how much money I was making at 9. By midnight, I had a 2-1 chip advantage. By 1 a.m., I had him within one hand of me winning the event. He came back in another 3 hours, 4 a.m., it finally finished, and he won. So
gotcha.
It was a crazy night, but probably one of the highlights of my life.
If you don't know poker very well, that's how it is. Like I've been heads up so many times with guys, and like you can go in and you think they're dead, and you start getting like, okay, I think they're dead, so I'm going to play some cards I might not want to play. 1 double up, then 2 double ups later, and then all of a sudden it's here you go.
Just make sure.
All right, so yeah, I mean you can switch. That's the thing about poker is it just can switch so freaking quick.
Yeah. So after that, like literally first 2 events I played, I won $300,000. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm now a tournament poker player. And for the next year and a half, I was traveling, playing all the World Series circuit events, the World Poker Tour circuit events, had a few deep runs, basically became friends with all the big names back then. Was kind of doing my job half time. Like my boss basically said, hey, as long as you don't quit, like you can go play poker as much as you want. So literally Friday morning, I'd fly out to Vegas, come back late Sunday night, play poker all weekend, work 4 days. It was crazy. And then in late 2006, I met my future wife, and we realized that, hey, at some point we're going to want to start a family. And I figured, okay, I guess I got to settle down at some point. I decided I either have to be a gambler who lives that lifestyle, or I got to go back to a normal 9-to-5 type life and start a family. And it was a pretty easy decision. But
how'd you meet Carol?
We worked together. So
okay.
I spent a couple years at eBay. She spent most of her career at eBay. And we met at work. Basically, I asked her out. She said she wouldn't date somebody that she worked with. So I quit my job, and essentially that's what happened. And I got another job, and we started dating. And a couple of years later, we got married.
She's fantastic too.
Yeah, she's awesome.
If people haven't listened, Jay and Carol, they run a BP business podcast, and they do a great job. Tucker and I were on there, but we went and spent a weekend with you guys a couple weeks ago, and man, we had so much fun. It was so enjoyable. Great kids, and Carol she lights up a room when she gets there.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like normally with a couple like us, one's the brains, one's the pretty face. Unfortunately, she's both. And
yeah,
I get most of the credit, but she does all the work, and she's the smart one and the pretty one.
Yeah, it's funny. That's what you talk about credit. I know Christy. Christy's she's the more introvert, so she doesn't get out on the podcast or the speaking and things like that. And so she went and met this guy at Charles event a couple of years ago, and she went to introduce herself, and she goes up, "Hey, I'm Chrissy." And he's like, "Oh, you're Elliot's," or she's like, "I'm Elliot's wife," or whatever. He's like, "Oh, you're Elliot's little helper," and then turned around and walked away. And she's like, "F you," But it's just like she runs most of the stuff. Like my life doesn't function without her.
Oh yeah,
like the kid stuff with Monty doesn't function. None of this stuff works without her.
I work a certain number of hours a week. She works an equal number of hours a week. And then she does like 100 hours, like with family stuff and running the household and everything else. So we're like 50-50 in the business. And then she does 90% of the rest of our lives. So she gets.
Yeah. So, okay. So you ran poker, met Carol, now we're 2008 and you get into BP and I pulled up your Bigger Pockets deal. You have 17,000. You've made 17,000 posts in Bigger Pockets.
And 16,000 of them were probably between 2008 and 2014.
Where did you find time to make that commitment? I mean, that was a commitment. That was a job in itself. And the thing about your posts were they weren't just like one sentence posts. They were like well thought out. And you're doing it a lot on your Facebook now. But where did you find time to do all that?
I've always enjoyed teaching.
Okay.
One of those people that one of my mottos in life is you don't really understand something unless you can explain it to other people. And for me, writing things and explaining things is my way of learning them. It forces me to learn. There have been plenty of times people see some of the things I write on Facebook and think, wow, that guy's brilliant. But what they don't realize is a lot of times I wrote that thing because it forced me to really learn it and really understand it to a point that I could explain it simply. So 10 minutes before I wrote it, I may not have understood it anywhere near that well. But by writing it, it forces me to really think about it and really start to understand it because I have to understand it to be able to explain it to other people. And so for me, all those posts, all that writing was really, it was a couple things. One, it was a way for me to keep myself accountable. So a lot of what I was writing about was my deals. And I knew that if I wrote about my deals and what I was doing, it would force me to actually keep doing it. And if I said, hey, I'm planning to do 20 deals this year, it's going to force me to do 20 deals because I don't want to write that and then have to come back and say, never mind, I gave up. Number two, I like teaching. So it was an opportunity to help other people that were looking to do the same thing. I mean, just documenting what you're doing, it's an easy way to teach others. And I'm a big believer that if you give, you'll get back. Don't give the expectation of getting back, just give and it'll come back to you. And then third, I'm a data-driven kind of guy. I like data. And so for me, capturing all the data on my flips, like the numbers down to the penny and the dates and how long things took and how much things cost, how weather impacted my schedules and weather impacted my budgets, and learning to estimate more precisely and learning shortcuts for estimating. Like, I like that. I like all that analytical stuff. And so for me, I was collecting all that information anyway. I'm like, hey, I might as well put it out there. Maybe somebody else will have some ideas on how to improve on all this stuff, or maybe somebody will give me their information. And so for me, data is kind of like a way of optimizing your business and your life. And so I'm always happy to put it out there because I might get it back from somebody else. So,
yeah, and while you were doing that, I remember when I first started, you had ran a blog. It was J123 Flip, right? And
123flip.com.
Yeah, and you documented like your first 50 flips.
Yep.
And like kind of fell off a little bit after that, but your first 50, you were like very well documented.
Yeah. So basically did a blog post a day on every one of our flips, pictures, videos, financials down to the penny. And that forced me to do things like before the flip, create my rehab estimate and say, this is how much flooring is going to cost. This is how much the roof's going to cost. And this is how much the fixtures are going to cost. This is how much the countertops are going to cost. And then go back after the project and say, this is how much I really spent. And I could see, okay, projects 1, 2, and 3, like I was 20% under on roofing costs. I was 40% under on flooring costs, whatever. And so for projects 4, 5, 6 through 50, it allowed me to kind of to course correct and figure out what those numbers really were. And it was a great way of collecting data for me, but it was also a great way of showing other people what the real numbers were. This is back in 2008, 9, 10, when there were a ton of flip shows on TV.
Yeah.
talking about how, I made 300,000 on this flip and I made 150,000 on that flip. And the reality was they weren't counting holding costs. They weren't counting selling costs. They weren't counting closing costs or loan fees. And so I was one of the first, and I'm kind of proud of this because it was a lot of work back then, but I think I was one of the first people that started putting literally all the financial details into blog posts so that people could see the real numbers for a real house flipper. Now everybody does it today, but back then it was, I remember just getting hundreds of emails saying, this is amazing. Like, you're willing to be this transparent and open. And for me, it's just, it's pretty obvious. Like, I wish there was somebody out there that would have told me that my average house flip, I would have made $15,000 back in 2008, because I probably wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, like on TV, I was going to make $150,000.
Yeah. It doesn't work that way most of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, unless you're really good at finding deals, but then that, how are you finding your deals back in 2008, 10?
It was so easy back then. So I like to say that in any market, it's either easy to find deals or easy to sell them. And anyone that started in the last 5 years probably thinks selling is never difficult. Selling is easy.
Yeah.
It's the buying them that's really hard. Well, let me tell you something. Back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, selling deals was really tough. There might have been 3 buyers looking for houses in my market where there was 300 houses for sale. So we had to have a house that was like top in terms of quality and price, and if we wanted to attract the buyer. And then even if we could attract a buyer, it was 50-50 that their finance was going to go through. Like, literally half of our deals didn't close for the first couple of years because the buyer just couldn't get financing. It just fell through. And so selling was really tough, but buying was awesome. You open up the MLS. My wife got her license, and you'd open up the MLS and you'd search for the words, the letters REO, and much any REO, if it wasn't already a great price, you can negotiate the bank down to a great price. And I mean, we were picking up deals. We could have done 10 times if we had known then that the market was going to really correct or improve. We probably would have bought 10 times as many deals, and they would have been out there easy to buy.
Yeah. Well, I think that's everything. Hindsight's everything. But
absolutely.
So when you went then, so you wrote the book, negotiating, or the rehab book, the book on rehabbing, and then the rehab cost estimator book. So it's 2 books.
Yep.
How did that get approached? How did that come out? And then did you use a lot of your stuff from your blog posts, or maybe talk a little bit about how that came to be?
Yeah. Okay. Funny story. So I'm an introvert. I hate talking to people I don't know. I find it really hard to have conversations.
Which is weird, because when we met you at like events and stuff, you were very extroverted. You would talk and do that. And then when we hung out at your house, I'm like, definitely an introvert, right? Like, it's fine.
I hide it well. I get myself psyched up. I'm like one of those guys that like stands in the bathroom and goes, "You're good enough. You're smart enough. You can do this. Go out there and get this done." And then I go out and I'm really excited and hyped up, and I can talk to people for an hour. And then I go back to my hotel room and I collapse.
Yeah.
Because I'm exhausted. So yeah, a lot of people don't realize it, but I really am. I'm introverted. It takes a lot of energy for me to talk to people. And when my blog started getting big back in 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I was getting a ridiculous number of people who wanted to take me out for coffee, talk on the phone, go to lunch, grab dinner, whatever it was. And I like to help people, but I don't like to talk to people. And so it was really hard for me. And so my wife Carol said, "Hey, why don't you just take all this information and stick it in a book? Every time somebody calls and says, 'Hey, can I pick your brain?' just say, 'Here's my book, go read it. If you still have questions after that,' which hopefully they wouldn't, 'come back and talk to me.'" And so I didn't write the book as like a way to make money. I didn't write the book as anything other than a way to get people to stop asking me to go to lunch or talk on the phone. And took about a year and a half, because again, I had not a ton of motivation. Took about a year and a half, and I had got this book called The Book on Flipping Houses. I finished the book, realized that one of the chapters was like 300 pages. And that was the chapter on estimating rehab costs. So I had this book that was like 550 pages long, where one chapter was 300 pages. And I said, okay, well, now I have 2 books. I'm just going to cut that chapter out. I'll keep a little bit in the flipping book, but then I'm going to use the rest of it as a whole second book. And so I had these 2 books, and I'm like, okay. I went on Amazon at the time, and they had this thing where you could like get books printed on demand. And I said, okay, I'm ready to launch this book. Next time somebody calls and asks me to lunch, I'm going to say, go buy the book. And I was talking to Josh Dorkin around that time, again, founder of Bigger Pockets. And I told him about said, or one of us, I don't remember who said it, but one of us said, maybe we could like promote the book through Bigger Pockets and just like split the profits or whatever. And whoever didn't say it must have said that's a good idea. And 2 months later, Bigger Pockets kind of put the book out there. They didn't have a publishing arm at that point. It was basically just, hey, I designed the cover and I edited it myself. And anybody that has one of the first versions of the book knows how poorly a job I did with the editing. And Josh just said, okay, I'll stick a page up on Bigger Pockets. And if somebody's talking about flipping in the forums, just mention that we have a book now. And that's how Bigger Pockets publishing got started. And that's how the books got started.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would be worried about my editing and one sitting down and actually typing that. Did you like physically type it or did you hire a ghostwriter?
Oh, no, every single word came out of my mouth or out of my fingers.
Nice.
And the first version, I thought I was a good writer and had good editing skills. And so I put the first version out there and literally the reviews were all like 5 stars for the content, 1 star for the editing. I'm still embarrassed every time I go look through like the couple 1-star reviews I have. It's all so many typos in this book and so many this and that. And so a couple years.
Does it still have 1-star reviews? Like, or did you edit it?
Yeah, they stick around forever. Stop looking. You're yeah. If you do a search on the 1-star reviews, almost all of them because there's so many typos on the book. And so that was the first version of the book.
That's funny.
And so we did a refresh of the books with actually good editing, professional cover design and all that back in 2018 or 19, and have added a couple more books since then that Carol and I have written. And so it's
yeah. So you have 4. You got 4. You got that I see. So 1 bestseller on Amazon, guys. Like if you're getting into real estate, like this isn't a pitch session by any means, but like if you're getting into real estate, like this stuff is still like, I know you've updated it for material costs and stuff, but this stuff is so valuable still today. Both of the books are bestsellers, over 1,000 reviews on Amazon. So, and then you also wrote the book on negotiating real estate and then also recession-proof real estate investing as well, right?
Yep. Yeah. My general philosophy is I will only write a book if I think I can do much better than whatever's out there, or if it's a book that hasn't yet been written. And so with the Flipping Houses book, my goal was to have it better than any of the other flipping books that I read. And I hope I accomplished that. But then the other 3 books, I wrote those because I couldn't find them. Like again, the estimating book ended up being a really long chapter because I couldn't find the information. I had to figure it out myself and figure out how to present it. The negotiating book, there are plenty of negotiating books out there, but none specifically for real estate investors. So I wrote that one. And I wrote that with my wife, Carol, and our friend, Mark Ferguson. Carol gets most of the credit for that book. And then the recession-proof book, I'm a big fan of economics and economic cycles. And there was no good book out there that talked about how economic cycles work in real estate and for real estate investors and how we can leverage the data that's available to us throughout the economic cycle to really improve our investing. So I said, hey, I'm going to go write this one. So that's kind of how that one.
Nice. Well, that's a great pivot too. Where do you think we are in the real estate cycle? You put a ton of time and a ton of effort out there, and I think it's such an unknown right now. Everybody's got an opinion, bond yield rates are rising, mortgage rates are going up with it because everybody thinks the Federal Reserve, interest rates is based on mortgage rates. It's really not. It's the Treasury. The Fed slowed down their buying of mortgage-backed securities, so then the bond yields went up, but then people are saying there's no inventory, but this and that, and I mean it's so hard because I feel like everything's cyclical to a certain extent, but I feel like we haven't been at this point in history before, and and maybe I'm wrong, but what's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's funny. I'm one of those people that says if you ever say this time is different because I just want to slap the crap out of you because it's never different. It's people always think this time is different and it's never different, but this time might be different.
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing. This time it really might be a little different. It's funny with cycles. And when I wrote the book, as I pointed out in the book, is that things happen in cycles, things repeat themselves. And over the last 150 years, we've had 33 economic cycles where the market kind of goes up, the market goes down, up, down, and that full up, hit the top, go down, hit the bottom, start going back up. That's called a cycle.
Yeah.
And it happens in individual markets. It happens in the broader economy. The whole economy has cycles. Then individual markets like real estate has cycles, and commodity markets have cycles, and all markets have cycles. But the broader economy has had 33 of these cycles over 150 years. Quick math, 150 divided by 33, good.
5.
Yeah, it's about 6. Actually, I'm sorry, 170 years, 33. So it's close to 6, about 5.8. So every 5.8 years.
Don't make me do math.
That's good. No, you did better than I did there. So if you do that math, you see that like the typical cycle, meaning the up, down, and start again, typically lasts about 6 years. And most people think economic cycle, because they started paying attention back in 2008.
Yeah.
Until 2020, people were like, oh, well, typical economic cycle is like 10 or 15 years. It's not. Normally it's about 6 years. And so what we've seen over the last 12 years has actually been kind of an anomaly. It's been the longest economic cycle in history. But the cool thing about cycles is that they repeat. So you go up, you go down, you go up, you go down. And at any given point, you can typically look around you. You can looking around you, looking at the data, looking at the timing of when the last cycle started. You can kind of figure out, are we on our way up or are we on our way down?
Mm-hmm.
If like we're getting near the top and we're getting ready to go down the other side, or if we're going down the other side and getting ready to go up again. But here we are in beginning of 2021, and who knows where the hell we are. Like there's a lot of indication that we're still going up. Like you look at the stock market says, hey, things are still going up. Everything's great. You look at the real estate market, values are going up 5, 10, 15%, in some cases over a couple months. It's nuts. Real estate's going crazy. So we're going up. But then you look at other things, look at unemployment. We're still at 10 million unemployed. And then another 5 million people who are not looking for jobs, who would be considered unemployed if they were actually looking for jobs. You look at things like GDP. GDP is still near 0%. You look at things like wage growth, and wage growth for high income earners is going great, but for low income earners is dropping. And so there are a lot of things that make us think, okay, things aren't that great. So we're kind of in this dichotomy where some indication that things are awesome, some indication that things are horrible. Which one is it? And the answer is it's all kind of made up. We're kind of nowhere right now because all this stimulus money that's coming in is distorting reality. All this, the interest rates being at 0%, the $6 trillion that the government has printed over the last year is just obfuscating like the reality of the situation. And if interest rates were to return to where they were a year ago right now, and the stimulus were to stop right now, the question is, where would the economy be?
Yeah.
Would it be going well or poorly? And nobody knows the answer to that question because there's just not enough information out there, and things are so wacky right now that nobody really knows. So my take is that at some point, whether it's a month from now, 3 months from now, or 6 or 12 months from now, at some point, we're going to get back to normal. We're going to have herd immunity on the virus. We're going to have interest rates. It probably won't go up, but they're not going down anymore. We're going to stop printing trillions of dollars. And when that happens, where's the economy going to be? That's the $1 million question, and we don't know.
Yeah, and that's what while you're talking, I'm looking at, because here we got the Fed ending March 17, 2021. The Fed's at $7.6 trillion in their balance sheet, which is just nuts when you compare it to where it was a couple of years ago. Their balance sheet's $2.2 trillion in mortgage-backed securities. They're buying 83 billion a week. It's nuts. So, and
that doesn't count everything that was allocated last week in the $1.9 trillion bill, because that hasn't all been allocated.
Yeah, it's just, and so it's like, okay, so it seems to stay pretty level where it was, but it's just like, how can we, if you look at this, sheet from 2008, our balance sheet on the Fed was $925 billion. And then levels out around 4 billion, from 14 to 16, 18. Yep. Then all of a sudden we go from 4 trillion all the way to almost $8 trillion. And it's like, and so, we printed, and, you get mixed stats, but I saw anywhere from like 25 to 30% the Fed added to the money supply in just 1 year.
Yep. And I have a feeling we'll be over 9 trillion by the end of this year, maybe closer to 10, because we're not done with stimulus. There may be another $2 trillion bill. Hopefully there won't be another $2 trillion bill, but we're going to see another year of a $1 trillion deficit. I mean, that's not going away. And so basically, I mean, everything that we've seen over the last 12 years since the 2008 crisis, I mean, it's all still happening.
Yeah, I mean, the federal government ran a deficit of $3.1 trillion in 2020, fiscal year 2020. And, if you just think that, somebody had made a comment on one of my posts the other day about, they paid $86 million to house, put, migrants in a hotel or whatever. Okay, regardless of politics aside, that's like 86 cents or like it's not even that. It's like compared to like what they actually spend. It's like people get numb to the amount of money that is being spent.
Oh, yeah.
And like, you just can't. And so again, it goes back to, you made a comment, like, if you say like, this time's different, I'm going to slap you in the face, but now this time might be different. Where are we? What are your thoughts moving forward?
Yeah. So I heard an interesting stat yesterday that kind of puts things into perspective, because everybody's saying the real estate market is so hot and everything's good and there are no issues in the real estate market. All the fundamentals are great. And don't get me wrong, I think real estate is not anywhere near as bad fundamentally as it was back in 2007, 2008. But I heard a stat yesterday that kind of puts things into perspective. Right now, today, there are more realtors than there are houses for sale. Yeah. How nuts is that? There are more realtors out there in the U.S. than there are houses for sale. And that just goes to the point that supply and demand is not driving the real estate market right now. The lack of supply and the continued or even increased demand is driving the real estate market. So now you have to ask yourself the question, why are we seeing lack of supply? Why are there so few houses? Maybe there's just a lot more real estate agents, which that's probably part of it. But there's also a lot fewer houses now than there normally are. I live in Sarasota, Florida. We're down 25% year over year on number of houses that in our inventory. Why is that?
Because
what do you think?
I mean, I think it's because the developers and the regulations to develop has been strained, and the cost of goods. So cost of goods to build houses made it unfeasible in a lot of ways to actually develop properties and make houses affordable. And
except that new construction accounts for a very small percentage of the total houses sold in this country. It's mostly resales. So the big drop off over the last year, and certainly there's been some drop off in new construction because new construction stopped back last March, April, May, and it's picking up again. But the big discrepancy is in the resales. And my best guess, and I haven't been able to find, there's no data out there that really says whether this is true or not, but common sense and my best guess tell me that there are millions of people out there that would love to be selling their houses right now, but because of COVID, they don't want buyers trouncing through their houses, or they are still quarantining to some degree and they don't want to be forced to leave their houses for 10 hours a day on the weekends. And so they're waiting for COVID to let up before they try and sell their house. There's also this issue that you sell your house right now, where are you going to move?
Yeah.
I've got a ridiculous amount of equity in the house I live in that I bought literally 6 months ago. But if I sell it, I'm just going to have to go buy another overpriced house.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking at housing starts here and it's just amazing. Like last year, it just got pummeled to a certain extent. But then, okay, so then you lighten the housing starts by a couple 100,000 nationwide, and then nobody wants to sell. So instead of putting grandma into a home or grandpa into a home, a retirement center, now all of a sudden they're finding live-in care. They're not moving, which isn't recycling the inventory because grandma and grandpa don't want to go to home because they don't want to go get COVID, and they don't want to live in New York where Como basically puts them all in there, COVID positive people back in the nursing homes, right?
We're not talking politics.
So I wasn't saying, I was talking about, that might be a reason, Yeah, that's not
absolutely.
political. I mean, it's just, but, so then there's less people going there. And then that's not recycling. And it's just like putting so much strain. And then you got record low interest rates where then all of a sudden your buying power goes so much more, because I was getting quoted. We just refied 7 of our 8 single family and duplexes in December. We're getting 2.6 to 3% interest on rentals. So then I got that money. So then that's fantastic and cheap. So then you can buy more, right? And so people can buy more affordable. And then it's just a dichotomy of so many different things. Yep. That it's like a perfect storm, right? Like that movie, Perfect Storm. It's like everything happened at once.
I have 2 people on my street that are older that are like going nuts because they see the values of houses in our neighborhood going through the roof. And they're like, we want to sell our houses, but they're basically, because they're older and we live in Florida, they're essentially quarantining still. They haven't been vaccinated, or they're really close to getting vaccinated. And so they haven't listed their houses over the last 6 months when they have really wanted to. And my guess is once they get vaccinated, they're gonna say, shit, I'm selling my house. I'm gonna take the big gain. And I have to wonder if there are 2 people on my street that are waiting for their COVID vaccine to sell their house. How many people are on the next street or the next street or the next street? I mean, there are millions of people literally out there who are probably waiting for their COVID vaccine before they list their houses. And as soon as they get that vaccine, they're probably going to list their houses. And now we have normal supply again. Or
do we go the other way? Or do we go I watch a lot of my buddy Ken McElroy. He's talking that, with forbearances, say there's 3 million forbearances that they expect that maybe in Q3, Q4, if they ever let people get foreclosed on, those come into the market. And I was thinking about it and I thought, okay, well, if we're only selling 1.3 million to 1.4 million houses a month nationwide, what is an extra 2 million? Does that really do anything at the end of the day? Because it's not going to all come at one time, right? Yep. So say we jump from 1.3 million, 1.4 million to 1.8 million, 2 million. Is that really going to balance out? But then I think what you're saying as well is on top of that, once the vaccine comes in and everybody sits back to normal, then all these people that should have sold, that's going to add another maybe 2 million or whatever it is houses in the market when they were 2.5, 2.6 a house.
Yeah, so I know Ken and I love Ken. Ken is an absolutely brilliant guy, and anything he says, we should be listening to. But I disagree with him on the forbearances. You look back to 2008 and what happened with the millions of foreclosures and how lenders didn't deal well with having to take all those foreclosures back. Trust me, they didn't do it because they wanted to. They weren't making money by taking those houses back. They lost a lot of money. And so I think lenders are smart enough that they're not going to create a foreclosure crisis unless they absolutely have to. And there are other alternatives for all of these houses that are in forbearance. I mean, it's up to the lender to decide. In some cases, it's federally mandated that the lender must decide that they're going to take some or all of those payments and throw them on the back end of the loan. So it extends the loans. It's not like most of these lenders are going to say, hey, Elliot, we let you decide not to make a loan payment in the last 12 months. Now you owe us a year's worth of interest. They're not going to say that. Or at least I don't expect them.
But does it hurt the banks though at the end of the day? I mean, because the banks, they're not lending their money. They're just creating the fictitious money on the balance sheet when they're lending it out most of the time anyway. So they really care.
So for the most part, it's the banks are reselling these loans anyway.
Yeah.
So it's going up to Fannie and Freddie and the quasi governmental entities anyway. But still, it's a reasonable question. But then the question becomes, do the lenders compound their losses by having to foreclose and reselling these things at a discount? And I think they'd rather just take the L on interest payments for a year and not compound it and put those loans back in force with the extra payments on the back end, and everybody's pretty much happy. So I think that's the more likely thing that's going to happen. Certainly, there are a lot of people. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of people who are in forbearance right now, not because they didn't want to pay their mortgage, but because they lost their jobs and they haven't had to pay their mortgage because of forbearance. And then when the forbearance ends, they're going to find themselves in a situation where they don't owe that whole last year of interest, but they are still having difficulty making their new mortgage payment because they don't have a job right now. So certainly there are going to be some people that are going to be facing foreclosure, and we are going to see an uptick in foreclosure rate when the forbearances end. But I tend to disagree with Ken, and maybe he's seen the data more so than I have, but I tend to disagree that we're going to run into a major foreclosure crisis like we did back in 2008.
Okay. So what do you do then? I'm a newer real estate investor, and I'm trying to get into this game. I want to buy some rentals. I want to do some fix and flips. I want to, but I'm listening to Ken. He says, don't catch the falling knife. You listen to Jay and you're saying, I think we're going to be okay. What do you do right now? I mean, other than get paralyzed, and how do you grow your wealth and do this game?
So the first thing I'll say is it's a good question. I get asked the question all the time. I have to ask myself the same question. Like we have cash and we're always looking for deals and we're always looking to grow our wealth. So I'm in the same boat. Few things I'll say. Number one, for all those people that say, hey, don't keep money in cash because keeping money in cash, you're losing out to inflation. Yeah, that's true. Let's say inflation's at 2% right now. You get to make the decision. Do you want to risk losing 2% next year because of inflation, or risk losing 50% because you make a bad real estate investment?
Yeah.
I think we'll all agree taking a 2% loss over the next year is survivable, and nobody's going to suggest we should avoid that at all costs. So Not a big deal. So first thing I'll say is don't rush out to do a deal if you don't like the deal. Don't get desperate, because this is the wrong time in the cycle to get desperate, wherever we happen to be in the cycle. Second thing I'll say is if you're investing for cash flow, if your goal is cash flow, you're going to have a tough time of it right now. In most parts of the country, you're not going to get cash flow. Either prices are way too high to get cash flow, or rental demand is relatively low and you're not going to see market rents or what used to be market rents. Most places it's the first. Prices are too high. There are a few places around the country where demand is dropping. Some of the big cities, New York City, San Francisco, rental prices are dropping tremendously.
Yeah, in the city, I mean, Seattle, I guess the condo market, rental market in downtown Seattle is down like 50, the rental price is like 50% down. I know my buddy Artem was telling us that LA last year lost 25% of rental rates. I mean, so it's changing the landscape of where to invest is what it's doing right now.
Exactly. But even the places where market rents are going up, prices are going up faster. Yeah. So cash flow is really tough anywhere. But here's the thing with buy and hold real estate. Cash flow is great. We all love cash flow. A lot of us tend to think cash flow is like the single thing that we're looking for in our rentals. I kind of have a different attitude. Certainly, if you're planning to retire next year, you need to retire next year, you don't have any other income, and you have to live off your cash flow, well, find the cash flow. You may not find it in real estate, go find it somewhere else. But if you don't need that cash flow to live, if your goal is to grow your wealth for the next 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, then it doesn't mean you shouldn't consider rental real estate, because rental real estate has plenty of other benefits that will allow you to grow your wealth. If you can do some rehab, if you can buy distressed properties and you can put a little bit of money into them and get them rented, well, you're going to have some forced appreciation right there. If I can buy a house, I can buy a house for $150,000 and rent it out for $1,500. Or I might be able to buy a house for $80,000, put 40 into it, so I have 120 into it. Now it's worth 150, and I get the 100, and I get the 1,500. In either case, I have a house worth 150,000. I'm getting 1,500 in rent. But in the second case, I just built $30,000 in equity through the renovations I did. Yep. So $30,000 goes right to my net worth. If I can buy 3 rentals this year where I get $30,000 in forced depreciation, I may not be getting much cash flow, but I just $100,000 in equity. So forced depreciation is the first way. Second is amortization. Get a loan against that property. So you may only be making 3, 4, 5, 6% cash on cash return. But if you look at the amount you're paying down on your loan, the principal that your tenants are paying down on your loan every month, at the end of the first year, the end of the second year, especially with 3% interest rates, 4% interest rates, the loan principal that you're paying down at the end of the year, that may account for another 3, 4, 5, 6% cash return, not actual cash return, but return in equity that you can pull out later in cash. So that's the second way. Third way is the tax benefits. So especially for people that have a W-2 job, for people that have a high income, the depreciation you can get on rentals, especially these days when we can take bonus depreciation, accelerated depreciation, thanks to Trump's tax cuts back in 2017, that's That's a huge benefit for real estate.
Can you do that? Can you take that depreciation if you're not a real estate professional?
You can take that depreciation up to the amount of your passive gains.
Gotcha.
So if
you can break even on the property, basically.
You can break even on the property. You can't lose money on the property, but you can break. Actually, I think you may be able to lose a few thousand. I'm not an accountant, but anything you don't use, you can carry forward to next year, in the year after, and the year after. So you're building up that depreciation. You're building up those tax benefits so that in the future you're going to have savings. And that's a real savings. That could be, depending on what your tax bracket is, depending on what the depreciation is, that could be an actual 1, 2, 3, 4% cash on cash savings.
Yeah.
So you add up the appreciation through renovation, you add up the principal pay down, you add up the tax benefits, and that property that's returning 4, 5, 6% cash on cash return is actually probably returning closer to 15 or 20% return.
Yep.
And so there are a lot of benefits. Now, again, some of that might be equity that you can't capture yet, but you go refi in 2 years, you can pull out that $30,000 in appreciation. You can pull out that $5,000 in principal pay down. So you can recapture that cash, even if you're not getting it every month like you are the rent. And so a lot of these rental properties today, while we look at them as 6% return properties, my properties that are returning 6% are actually returning about 20% when I factor in all the benefits.
I know I use your calculator. I actually added some stuff on the bottom of that calculator you did to kind of figure that out, because last year when they started printing all this money, I'm like, I need to buy more real estate. And so we added 36 doors, and then we're tied up in a 24 unit. We're going to build a ground up 13 unit. And so my thought too is not only the appreciation, the debt pay down, all those factors. But if I can't replace that building for what I'm buying it for, especially with lumber prices and how hard it is to develop, I'm still like, maybe the numbers aren't great, but if I can't replace that building for what I'm buying it for, I feel like I'm doing okay.
Yep.
And that would be, if I went and did all brand new plumbing, electrical, all those things, but the structure is going to stay very similar, right? If I can't build that structure again because of permit fees, lumber costs, roofing costs, all those things, I feel like I'm doing okay.
Absolutely. 100%. And all of this that we've discussed so far ignores probably the biggest potential, not necessarily guaranteed, but the biggest potential benefit for rental real estate right now. And that's inflation.
Yep.
So for those that are listening to this that don't really know what that means, think of inflation, and this isn't the technical definition, but think of it as the prices of stuff goes up. Mm-hmm. And as the price of stuff goes up, that's inflation. We tend to think in terms of a gallon of milk goes up in price, eggs go up in price, movie tickets go up in price. But here's the thing, when we see inflation, typically the other things that go up in price are housing values and rental rates and salaries. 3 big things that go up in addition to the price of the milk and eggs and butter and cars and movie tickets. And so if you have cash during inflation, a lot of us understand that cash is a bad thing to have during inflation. And we talked about it earlier in this discussion where I said, thanks to inflation, our cash is worth about 2% less every year.
1.7%. I'm looking, I have the consumer price index up right now. 1.7 is what they say.
Is what they say.
Yeah.
Here's a couple of things to keep in mind about that. Real quick diversion. One, don't believe the government when they're telling you what the inflation numbers are. We're probably closer to 4 or 5% because they changed the definition, what's factored into that, whether it's commodities or assets or, and so, don't listen to that. It's higher than that. But the second thing is the Federal Reserve came out last year and said, we need higher inflation. And for anybody that's been paying attention, you know that when the Fed wants something, the Fed gets it.
Yep.
So when the Fed said a couple months ago, and then they said it again a couple weeks ago, we want higher inflation, you can bet we're going to see higher inflation.
Yeah, because if you look at this chart, like there's some big ones going up, and then there's the ones like lodging away from home is down 15%. Other lodging away from home, hotels and motels down 17%. All these things that are the huge negative. Airline fares are down 25%. Those are huge factors that balance it out. So if you look at real household inflation, that doesn't really matter. So, that doesn't play into this. Like, it's not low.
Right. Exactly. So you have this inflation. We all agree that having cash during this inflationary period, it's a bad thing because our cash is worth less. We can't buy as much with the cash. So the first thing we can do to really offset that risk, if you think inflation is coming, is buy real estate. Because again, what I said before was during inflation, not just the price of eggs and milk and cars and movie tickets goes up, but the price and the value of assets goes up. So if everything doubles in price due to inflation, and I don't think everything's going to double in price, that's a ridiculous amount of inflation, but for the sake of argument, let's say everything doubled in price, chances are the real estate that you own is going to double in price as well. Mm-hmm. Rental real estate will allow you to keep pace with inflation. You're not losing money because of inflation. You're keeping that money. Not just will the price of your real estate double, but your market rents will probably double. Yeah. Your market rents will go up. So you're making more income. Likewise, your salary is probably going to double. Now, why does the fact that your salary going to double, how does that factor in? Well, think about if you own a piece of real estate and you actually get a loan against that piece of real estate. So let's say you buy a $100,000 house and you take out a loan and you're paying $1,000 a month on that house. And let's say that $100,000 house that you are paying $1,000 a month on, you have $100,000 a year in income. Okay. What percentage of your income are you spending every month to pay your mortgage?
Well, 10% of your yearly, 10% of your yearly income, right? No, 12%.
1%.
Okay. Yeah.
1% monthly.
Yeah.
So 1% of that $100,000, $1,000 is going towards that mortgage every month. Now, let's say we have ridiculous inflation. And again, I don't expect this to happen, but let's, for the sake of argument, say we have ridiculous inflation. Everything doubles in value next year. Your house is now worth twice as much. You're making twice as much in rent. And now you're making twice as much in salary because inflation increases salary as well. So instead of making $100,000, you're now making $200,000 a year. How much is your mortgage every month?
$1,000.
$1,000. It didn't go up.
Yep.
It's the one thing that didn't go up. So you're now paying that $1,000 mortgage with your $200,000 a year salary. So instead of paying that mortgage with 1% of your salary, you're only paying that mortgage with 0.5% of your salary.
Yep.
So you're spending less money on that mortgage thanks to inflation. And so literally the single best hedge against inflation is debt.
Yep.
Having debt against an asset that you own, you're going to be paying down that mortgage, you're going to be paying down that debt with a lower value dollar than what you got that debt with.
But then Jay, people say, well, if I just went from my house being worth $100,000 to $200,000, then I should refi it and pull out $80,000 in cash, pull a refi out $180 and reset that debt. Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
That's
what people say though, right? They say, you have debt equity now. Now or people raise their level of living, or they do all this and spend more, right? Because
that's the big question. So if you ask me, should I pull that $80,000 out? My first question to you is, what are you going to do with that $80,000? If you're going to go buy a Tesla or go take a trip to Alaska or go to Disney World for 24 hours and spend $80,000, because I think that's what Disney World costs these days.
Close.
Yeah, I would tell you, don't do that. But if you told me you're going to take that $80,000 and you're going to go buy 2 more cash flowing rentals with 10% down, I'd say do that all day.
Yeah.
Because you're leveraging that money. You're taking that money out at 3 or 4%. And again, if you're doing it right, you're making 15 or 20% on that money all in by buying more rentals.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, it depends. But the big thing it depends on is what you plan to actually use that money for.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Most people just refi and pull this cash out like it's a freaking ATM. And that's, what got us in trouble in 2008, a lot of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They buy cars, they buy vacations, they do upgrades to their houses that they're not going to get the money out when they sell. They go and buy watches. Yeah. That's crap. Don't do that shit.
Yeah. What we did is on our 7 of our 8 like singles and doubles, one of them we're just going to pay off and put a HELOC on it. That's why we only did 7. We had it all 8 in there. We actually just did rate and terms on all but one, but it was a BRRRR deal. But we just did rate and terms because I feel like that's I could pull that cash and I probably have debt equity, but it's like, that's a safety net to a certain extent, right? Like if everything fell down around me, like and the market crashed by 40%, I'm still net positive, right? And Absolutely. I can live off of this. That was kind of our thought process.
And here's the thing. That's the other nice thing about rentals is historically, let's use the word historically. I don't want to use typically, but historically, when we see a decline in the real estate market, and it doesn't happen very often, but when we see a decline in the real estate market, we tend not to see anywhere near the same decline in the rental market.
Yep.
So back in 2008, in a lot of places, housing prices were dropping 15, 20, 25%. Rents were dropping 1%, 2%. In some places, they were going up.
Yep.
So yeah, as long as you're comfortable holding that property for the next 5 or 10 years, who cares if it goes down in value tomorrow, because you're still collecting the same amount of rent. With inflation, you may be collecting more rent, and the value is going to return and probably far exceed where it is now in 10 years.
Yep. All right. So switching gears, I think that was a great finance lesson, by the way, guys. If you don't understand a lot of this stuff, go back and listen to it again. But you were doing a bunch of fix and flips, and then last year you got into some business with some buddies, and then you started buying some apartments. I think you bought a really big deal in Houston, and you were making some offers on some other. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you've been up to for the last 18 months? Let's call it.
Yeah. So for the last 2 years, I've kind of been in a trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up sort of phase. Spent a long time in the corporate world, as we discussed, kind of really focused on my job. Then I spent the last 10 years, 2008 to 2018, focused on single family. Since 2018, I've kind of done a bunch of different things, and it wasn't really clear what I wanted to do. I was getting bored with single family. We've done about 600 between flips and rentals, new construction, notes, lending on single family. And I was feeling a little burned out. I was feeling like there wasn't a lot of challenge there anymore. And so for the last 2 years, we've kind of been looking for what is that next challenge going to be. We've done some businesses, we've done some multifamily, we've done a little bit of commercial, we've done some other investments. I've done a lot of angel investing, and we own racehorses, and I've kind of dabbled in a whole.
Is racehorses really investing though? I thought that's just a spot for people to dump money and like hopefully maybe one day it pays off.
Yeah, it's gambling.
Yeah,
we've gotten very fortunate that we've made some money doing it, but 100%. Don't let anybody ever. Yeah, I shouldn't have said investing. If I use the word investing with racehorses, certainly kick me in the ass. It's not an investment. But we've dabbled in kind of a whole bunch of different things because honestly, I was just bored and was just trying to figure out what to do next. And like you mentioned, back in September, we did a big apartment deal. We bought a value-add apartment complex in Houston, Texas, 150 units. A little over 20 million. And it got me excited. For the first time in a long time. It really,
how big was it?
150 units, a little over $20 million.
Nice. Big deal.
And, yeah. And so I was very fortunate. I found a woman named Ashley Wilson, who has been doing multifamily investing for a long time. And she kind of took me under her wing, and she's kind of been mentoring me for the last year and a half. And we did this deal together. And I approached her a couple months ago and said, hey, this is what I'd really like to be focused on for the next 5 or 10 years. You want to work together? And she said yes. And so I haven't really talked about it until now, but basically as of about right now, I'm kind of all in on multifamily, value-add multifamily and multifamily syndications. And yeah, so Ashley and I are going to be partnering, and this is going to be my main focus for the next several years.
Now, how are you guys planning on sourcing deals? Because all the stuff that I've read and heard is like, all the value adds are gone. Again, I'm going to go back to Ken here. When we were hanging out with him, he was like, they're building now instead of doing because they can't really find value adds. He told me a great story of they were listing a property. And they got it listed and they got under contract, and all of a sudden somebody sent him a pitch deck of this property that is way undervalued. We're going to add all this money to it, and it was his property. Because there's a lot of people out there that don't know what they're doing, right? And very optimistic. How are you guys managing that and figuring that part of it out?
Yeah, so for us, it really boils down to two things. One is relationships. So again, working with Ashley, and she's done a tremendous job in the markets that she's in, building relationships with brokers, with sellers, with lenders, basically the people that have access to the deals.
Mm-hmm.
So like the deal we did a few months ago, that was essentially an off-market deal that was brought to us first. Seller was pretty desperate to sell, and we negotiated a good price thanks to the fact that we had that relationship. Had we waited for that broker to take it to 3 other investors and when nobody wanted it, then just send it out to his email list, it would have been a bad deal by that point. But because it came to us first, thanks to her relationships, that was a big part. The second big part, especially when it comes to what we're doing, which is syndications, it's value add. Basically, you bring in a bunch of investors, you get some debt, it's essentially flipping a multifamily. You do renovations, you bring up the value, you resell it, and everybody makes a lot of money. One of the best ways to do these deals or to find deals where deals otherwise wouldn't exist is to get your cost of capital down.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is if you have to pay investors 16, 17, 18%, it's really hard to get the numbers to work because so much of your money has to be paid in profit to your investors. So there's nothing left for you and there's nothing left to buy the building. So if you can get that cost of capital, if you can get the amount that you're borrowing money on or getting equity on lower, the numbers work out better. So in theory, if I could get 0% loans, there's a million value add properties out there. Because when you don't have to pay anything on debt, and you don't have to pay anything to your investors, their deals all the numbers always work. In reality, you're always somewhere in between 0 and 18%. So most multifamily investors are somewhere in the 14, 15, 16, 17 range.
On the IRR?
On the IRR, exactly. Yeah. We're working hard to get our cost of capital down closer to 10, 11, 12, 13%. And so that will allow us to do a lot more deals than a lot of other multifamily investors are doing.
Okay, nice. Yeah, it's could you explain IRR in a layman 2 sentences really quick? Yeah.
So here's the best way to think of it. If I stick money in a bank account and next year it pays me 5%, let's say I stick $100 into a bank account, I get 5% interest. Next year, I made $5. They hand that to me the year after I make $5. They hand it to me the year after I make $5. They hand it to me. I'm making 5% on my money, right? Mm-hmm. Well, what if I took that 5% and I put it back into the bank account the first year? So the next year I'm making 5% of 105, which is 5. So now I take that money and I put it back in the bank account. The third year I'm making 5% of about 112. Yeah. So at the end of the third year, instead of having my $100 in principal plus my $15 in interest, I have somewhere closer to $120. 120 instead of 150. It's called compounded return. You're basically taking the returns that you're making and you're putting it back in the deal and you're using that to grow. So typically IRR is a measure of the compounded return. So taking that 5% out, we say I have a 5% return. But if you look at the compounded return over 3 years, where I have closer to $120 now, that looks more like the equivalent of like a 7%. Yeah. And we call that the IRR.
Yeah, so, which is an internal rate of return, correct?
Yeah. It's basically your compounded rate of return. It assumes that all the money you're making on the deal gets funneled back into the deal, and you're making more on that money as well.
Yeah, awesome. So you're going after big deals, though. You were putting in some offers. You guys are going after big stuff, right?
We've put in a couple offers. Nothing we've gotten yet. We've gotten close on a couple, but we've put in a couple offers over 100 million, which is. It's crazy. I mean, but like after taking down the $20 million property, it's you kind of lose sense of that's just another zero.
Yeah.
So
Grant Cardone Jr. over here.
Yeah. It's, again, having an awesome team and an awesome partner has allowed me to do that.
Yeah. Now, how are you going to be involved in the operations? Are you involved in the capital? Are you involved in the money? What part of this is your main focus?
So I'm the COO. So okay. I'm the operations guy. So I'm going to be the one that's building the team, that's doing all the hiring, that's basically structuring the organization, getting everything running like clockwork. Ashley is more of the building relationships with the brokers. She's the visionary, focused on the capital raising stuff. So I'm more nuts and bolts, and she's more bringing in the money and doing the vision.
Awesome. Man, you got a lot of cool stuff, and you still do stuff. You advise for Bigger Pockets too, and you're still doing very active with them, which is awesome.
Yep. Yeah. I get bored easily. So I can't do just one thing. I can focus on one thing, but I have to be doing some other things as well.
I know. I just had a call with Nathan Brooks, you know him as well. And it basically is like, you have 5 things going and you haven't systematized any of them. And I'm like, I'm enjoying being busy. He's like, yeah, but your wife's going to murder you. So let's get these kind of built out a little bit first, you know?
Nathan's a good guy. Nathan's a smart guy.
Yeah. But in my mind, I'm like, well, this is part of the same bucket. You know, this is, where, maybe it's development, but it's part of the acquisitions for all the other stuff. And so,
yeah. And one of the things Nathan and I are both good at is kind of putting tentacles out there and touching a lot of different things and finding the opportunities and then kind of grasping the opportunities and then kind of pushing the other stuff away.
Yeah.
Too many people latch on to too many things. I've tried to make a habit of not latching on until I'm confident to really focus on something.
Gotcha. Cool, man. Well, I have taken too much of your time today, guys. Sorry for the longer show. I just think there was so much value to unpack here. We might actually put it in two episodes, but really appreciate your time. And, we'll look forward to having you on in the future. Once you do a deal, I'd love to hear more, maybe do a deal breakdown on one of these $100 million deals once you get it done.
Awesome. Would love to talk about it. And
so where can people find out more about you? Where can you buy your books and all that good stuff?
Yeah, thanks. For anybody that wants the books, they're on Amazon.com or the Bigger Pockets bookstore, biggerpockets.com/store, or Barnes & Noble now. You can get them in bookstores. And anybody that wants to connect with me, real easy, go to www.connectwithjscott.com, and that has links out to me.
Awesome. All right. And you also, if you guys want to listen to more Jay, he does the Bigger Pockets business show every week with his wife, Carol.
Yep.
And is a contributor with Fixated Real Estate as well, and does a lot of that stuff moving forward. So, all right, Jay, thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Elliot.
All right.
See ya.